Now let's proceed to understanding clocking range for each of your clocking intervals in the clocking schedule. What is a clocking range? A clocking range is the time permitted by the company to be considered as clocking data for a particular column. Take for example, a clocking range for Monday morning is 11:30 a.m. This means that any of the clocking activities that have been done by an employee inside prior to 11:30 will be displayed as in clocking data. If the clocking range is left blank, the midpoint of the clocking times that you have set inside the clocking schedules will be the clocking range for each of the column. This is how to illustrate when clocking range is left blank. Your in time is 9 a.m. and your break time is 12 p.m. 10:30 will be taken as the midpoint. Therefore, any clocking activities done before 10:30 will fall into the in clocking column of the attendance sheet, and all activities after 10:30 until the next time range will fall into the break time. Now, define the clocking range for each day inside the clocking range setting of your clocking schedule. The next option is to replace with latest clocking. This rule is dedicated to those who are specifically using the access control terminal for attendance. Replace with latest clocking means that if the out time inside a clocking schedule is set as 6 p.m., the system can then replace the data with the latest clocking recorded at the terminal. This feature will make sure that the latest clock out time will be displayed in the clocking schedule out time. You can select this option for any of the columns of clocking as you wished. The next option is to enable attendance records from selected devices. In a scenario whereby you are using multiple devices for different clocking types, you can select attendance data to be taken from selected devices only and for any of the clocking data. Take for an example, you are using 2 devices and you want clocking data for the in time to be taken from clock A and data for the out time taken from clock B. Hence, you need to select clock A for in and out from clock B, click Save before you move on to the next General Rules. At the General Rules of your clocking schedule, you can choose to enable or disable employee from selecting their clocking status on a fingertech device. Click on Edit, select Yes to enable it. Following the status that they selected on the device, the attendance sheet will display the clocking data inside each column accordingly. Next is the rounding rules of the clocking schedule. Let's learn how to round up the work time to the nearest minutes. Set these options to 30 minutes round up. Therefore, in an 8-hour working environment, employees have that 30 minutes allowance time in case they need it and not be counted as short hours. For as long as an employee has worked for 7.5 hours, the total work hour will automatically be rounded to 8. How about if a company chooses to round down the work time to the nearest minutes? Now we set this option to 30 minutes round down. Therefore, in an 8-hour working environment, if an employee works past 7 hours 30 minutes but not reaching 8 hours yet, when he or she clocks at any time between 7 hours 30 minutes and 8 hours, his or her total time will only be 7 hours 30 minutes. Even if he or she clocks out at 7 hours 50 minutes, the system will take only 7 hours 30 minutes into consideration. This is the exact same rule applicable for overtime calculation. If your company rounds up to a certain minutes, for example for 15 minutes, if an employee works overtime for 1 hour 45 minutes, his total hours will be rounded up to 2 hours. If your company sets this option to down, the system will round down the overtime hours to only 1 hour and 30 minutes. If these rules are not applicable to your organization, skip them and leave them blank. The next rounding rule inside the weekly clocking schedule of Ingress software is the first rounding time range. The first rounding time range is for the in time of the clocking that has been set inside the clocking time. Take this example, set the time for the first rounding time range between 8:30 and 9:30 to be rounded to 9. Hence, any clocking that is done between 8:30 to 9:30 will reflect 9 in the attendance sheet. The last rounding range is for the out time or the last clocking activity of the clocking schedule in the attendance sheet. If the range has been set between 5:30 to 6:30 to be rounded to 6, any clocking for the out time done between 5:30 to 6:30 will be rounded down to 6 p.m. and the data be reflected in the attendance sheet. Let's learn about setting up the break rule for your weekly clocking schedule inside TCMS v3. First, do not deduct any lunchtime if the employee works half-day only rule. Take a 9 to 6 work hour situation whereby the total work hour is 9 hours. but a company deducts an hour for break, which makes the total work hours becomes 8. Therefore, if your company applies this rule, those who work half day, for example from 9 to 1, will have 4 work hours total, and the lunchtime will not be deducted. The next two rules are: do you want to apply auto and break rule when you include lunch or dinner time, and do you want to include lunch or dinner time into overtime? To understand this rule, read this example. If an employee is allowed to take 1 hour of break, and instead of 1 hour break he takes 30 minutes break, the remaining 30 minutes will be added to his total work hour time. However, by selecting this option, the remaining 30 minutes will be added to his working hours as overtime hour. Therefore, the first rule is connected to the second rule, and if you agree to the first rule, the extra minutes from the unused break will be added to the employee's overtime hours. The next break rule is: do you want to deduct any extra lunch or dinner time from working hour? By selecting this option, the company is restricting employees from taking longer breaks, and they need to utilize the break time allocated to them only. With this rule, if a user takes a longer break, the total extra minutes that have been taken will be deducted from the staff's total work hours. Another rule is: deduct the number of hours for break time from overtime hour. This rule means that if a company sets the time here at 1 hour, and the overtime period at 3 hours, it translates to the fact that if a user takes 3 hours of overtime, 1 hour of break will be deducted from these total overtime hours. If your company does not apply any of these rules, leave them blank, save and move on to the next option.